"Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to step away from the aircraft." The voice was sharp, cold. The young black woman turned, her designer handbag still hanging from her arm, her boarding pass in one hand and her son's hand in the other. She blinked, confused for a second, then looked at the flight attendant who had suddenly blocked her path. "This jet?" the attendant added, gesturing toward the sleek, shining aircraft behind her. "It's reserved for private charter. You're not cleared to board." The woman frowned slightly. "Yes, I know, that's my jet." The attendant didn't blink. "I'm going to need to see proof of that." Around them, whispers started. A couple walking past slowed down. A man on his phone stopped talking mid-sentence. Her son, no older than 8, looked up at her, his small hand tightening around hers. "Mom, why are they stopping us?" he asked softly. She bent down to him, brushing a hand over his cheek. "It's okay, baby. We'll be on board in just a second." But the attendant didn't move. Another man in a suit walked up behind her. Security, from the way he squared his shoulders. "Is there a problem here?" he asked. "She's trying to board the private jet. Says it's hers," the flight attendant said, not even bothering to lower her voice. The security officer looked the woman up and down, not the way a person should look at another, the way a scanner does, judging, weighing. He tilted his head. "Do you have paperwork to prove that?" "I'm flying under my own registration," she said calmly. "Check the manifest." "Carter, Jet Holdings." The man raised an eyebrow. "You're Mrs. Carter?" "Yes, Dr. Carter." He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just gave a short laugh, low and mocking. "Ma'am, we don't mean to be difficult, but people don't just walk up to jets like this, especially not without clearance. I have clearance, and I'm telling you I need to verify it. You don't exactly look like the type who—" He stopped himself just in time, but not really. She stood up straighter, her posture unshaken. "Like the type who what?" "I'm sure you understand protocol," he said quickly. "No, I don't understand." She wasn't yelling, wasn't crying, but the way her voice dropped, controlled, tight, it made even the whispering passengers around them fall into silence. Her son tugged her sleeve again. "Are we still going to see Uncle Reggie?" She forced a small smile. "We are, sweetheart." The attendant crossed her arms. "Look, maybe you mistook the hangars. Commercial gates are back that way." She pointed behind them, toward the terminal. "There's no way you own a jet like this." The boy looked up at her. "Mom, why does she think we're in the wrong place?" She looked into his eyes. That was the moment when calm became something else. Not anger, not yet, but the rising of something deeper, older, the weight of every time she'd had to prove herself twice. Speak softer, dress better, be more polite, and still be questioned. People were watching now, phones out, recording, some hiding it, some bold. "She's trying to fake her way onto a jet," someone whispered. "What's she thinking?" Another voice, more doubtful. "She looks like she knows what she's doing, though." But that didn't stop the second security guard who now stepped in. "Ma'am, we're going to have to detain you for questioning. You can wait over there while we verify your identity." She blinked. "Detain me? For trying to board my own jet?" "You're escalating, ma'am," one of them said, hand brushing his hip where a badge gleamed. "I haven't raised my voice, haven't moved. I walked up to my jet with my son, then prove it," the attendant said, arms still crossed. "Show us you belong here." She glanced around. The stairs were harder now. One woman mouthed something that looked like ghetto. A man in a blazer chuckled and said under his breath, "No way she owns that jet. Must have stolen someone's pass." Her son looked scared now. "Are we in trouble?" She kneeled beside him again. "No, but sometimes, when people don't understand something, they act like you're wrong just for being you." "But we're not wrong," he whispered. "I know." The moment stretched. The security team moved closer. The gate manager appeared from the terminal, frowning. More. Passengers trickled in behind them. Murmurs turned into judgment. "She's holding up the crew. Probably some influencer who rented a jet for photos. They should just remove her already." She stood slowly, dignified, tall, still calm, but the weight on her shoulders had never felt heavier, not because she was afraid, but because she had to be stronger. Again, for her son, for the little boy who was watching how the world treated his mother. One of the guards spoke into his radio. "Possible ID fraud. Gate 7. Black female, mid-30s, child in tow, requesting verification on jet ownership." And there it was. Cold, clear, just like that. She became a suspect. She reached into her bag, her movements slow, measured. A couple of guards twitched at the sight. She paused. "It's just my folder," she said. "You can relax." She pulled out a thin, black leather case, opened it. Her fingers moved with purpose. The woman who had doubted her the loudest leaned in slightly, still skeptical. The mom didn't say a word yet, just handed over a single laminated page. The guard took it. "Read. Read again." Silence. His face changed. slightly, then all at once. He looked at the woman. The flight attendant stepped closer. Well, what does it say? He turned the document around. Her name, her credentials. Owner, Dr. Alexis Carter, CEO, Carter Jet Holdings. Net worth valuation, $2.1 billion. The silence fell heavier now. Someone in the back gasped. Someone else dropped their phone. And still, she said nothing. She just looked down at her son and said softly, "Told you, baby. We're going to see Uncle Reggie." And then she waited, because now it was their turn to speak. Her name was Dr. Alexis Carter, but in this moment, none of that seemed to matter. She was a mother, a pilot, a businesswoman, and the founder of one of the fastest-growing private aviation companies in the country. She had built Carter Jet Holdings from the ground up, starting with one leased plane and a dream. That dream had become a fleet, a staff, offices in 5 states, clients that included celebrities, athletes, and executives who never once questioned whether she belonged in the cockpit. But now, standing on the tarmac beside her son, she felt something far more familiar than success. She felt small, not because she doubted who she was, but because the world had a way of shrinking people like her, people who didn't fit their idea of what wealth or power should look like. This wasn't the first time she'd been questioned. There had been stares at the board meetings, questions worded carefully. Who's your partner? Are you the operations assistant? Who handles the financing for you? They never imagined she was the partner, the founder, the financier. She had learned to smile through it, to correct them gently, to let her numbers speak louder than their ignorance. But this time was different. This wasn't a backhanded compliment or a dismissive tone in a meeting. This was her being stopped, publicly humiliated, in front of her child, on a runway she paid to lease, next to a jet she owned. And as she stood there, hearing the disbelief in their voices, feeling the stares burning into her back, she felt something rise in her. Not rage, but a tired ache, a familiar kind of heartbreak. She glanced at her son, who was now quiet, trying to understand why the grown-ups didn't believe his mom. He had always seen her as a superhero. He fixed things, built things, protected people. Now his eyes were searching hers for answers, and all she could offer was composure. It had taken her 15 years to get here. 15 years of sleepless nights, missed holidays, silent sacrifices. She'd flown dangerous routes in bad weather, when no one else would. Pitched to investors who called her ambitious for a woman. Signed deals in rooms where she was the only one who looked like her. She'd been laughed at when she applied for her first business loan. Denied twice. The third time they offered her a fraction of what she needed, but she took it, stretched it, grew it, turned it into more than anyone expected. Her mother used to tell her, "You don't have the luxury to be average. You have to be exceptional, just to be treated fairly." So she was. Every day, unfailingly. Fairness still felt out of reach. She could buy the building. Someone would still ask her if she was the janitor. She could own the company. Someone would still tell her she looked too young or too urban. Now, on a sunny morning with her son beside her, and the engines cooling behind them, the old ache returned, not just for herself, but for what her son was learning today. He was learning that no amount of excellence could protect you from judgment. He was learning that dignity wasn't always something you were given. Sometimes you had to claim it, and she hated that lesson. But even now, she knew she couldn't show anger, couldn't raise her voice, because if she did, if she gave them even one excuse, they'd twist it. Say she was being aggressive, difficult, unstable. So she held her ground, spoke softly, gave them time to embarrass themselves. Still, inside her, the pain was real. Doubt crept in, not about who she was, but about how long she'd have to keep fighting the same fight. Would it ever change? Would her son have to go through the same thing when he grew up? Walk into rooms that weren't made for him, only to be treated like a trespasser? She wanted to believe in progress. She had believed. Every deal, every flight, every success felt like a step forward, not just for her, but for people who looked like her. Moments like this reminded her, sometimes the world doesn't care how far you've come. It only sees what it wants to see. And today it saw a black woman in luxury and decided it had to be a mistake. She watched the security guards mutter, watched the crew fidget, watched strangers record her like she was a spectacle. And still, she didn't cry. She didn't lash out, because this wasn't just about getting on that jet. It was about showing her son what strength looked like, what quiet power looked like, what dignity looked like. She would not let them take that from her. Not today. So she waited. Let them doubt. Let them fumble. Let them show the world exactly how ugly their assumptions were, because soon she would show them who she really was. And when she did, she wouldn't need to raise her voice. The truth would be loud enough. The woman's voice crackled again over the radio, louder this time, less patient than before. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from the aircraft until proper verification is completed. You're making this difficult." Alexis blinked slowly, forcing herself to breathe. Her son clutched her hand, his small fingers tightening around hers. She could hear the doubt in the silence around them. Other passengers whispering, the private jet crew avoiding her eyes, the security officer standing a little too close now, hand resting near his belt as if she posed a threat. "What exactly do you need verified?" she asked, her voice steady, her tone professional. The woman hesitated for a beat, then said, "Well, you're not listed as part of the flight manifest. This aircraft is under a premium charter listing." "I know that," Alexis replied, "because I own it." There was a pause, then a dry laugh from one of the security guards. "Right, and I'm the president." Alexis turned to face him, not angrily, not defensively, but with a slow, controlled stare that made the man glance away. She'd faced worse, bigger men, harsher words, but something about today made it all feel heavier. Maybe it was because her son was here. Maybe it was because she hadn't slept. Maybe it was just one injustice too many. A second security vehicle pulled up beside them. More uniforms stepped out, and now the whispers were growing. "Do you think she really owns that jet? No way, look at her. She probably faked something. These people always have an angle. These people." She'd heard it 1,000 times, in different tones, from different mouths. It always meant the same thing. People like you. It didn't matter what you wore, how educated you were, what your bank account said. If you didn't look the part, the world would always be suspicious. One of the men from the new vehicle walked up to her, holding a clipboard like it was a weapon. "Name? Dr. Alexis Carter." He scribbled something, not even looking up. "Title? Founder and CEO, Carter Jet Holdings." Another pause. His pen stopped. He finally looked up. "You said CEO?" She nodded once. "Of this company?" He gestured lazily toward the plane as if the idea itself was absurd. She didn't flinch. "Yes, this exact company. That exact plane." He blinked, then smirked. "You got any proof of that?" Her lips parted slightly, but she said nothing. For a moment. Not because she was unsure, but because she was trying to decide if it was worth it. If any explanation would ever be enough. Another voice chimed in. One of the flight attendants, younger, clearly nervous. I checked the manifest again. It's strange. There's a Carter listed as principal owner, but it's not a Mr. Carter." Alexis turned toward her. "That's because there is no Mr. Carter. There's only me." The attendant paled. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." "It's fine," Alexis said flatly. But it wasn't fine. She could feel the sting under her skin, the slow simmer rising from her chest to her throat. She looked at her son again, who now had that look, confused, unsure if he was the one doing something wrong. He looked up at her like he was trying to understand a new language, one filled with suspicion and coded words and quiet hatred. And still, she stood tall. The guard with the clipboard didn't look convinced. He turned to his partner and muttered, "Maybe someone's running a scam, can't be too careful. You see how much these jets are worth?" Alexis didn't move, but she caught every word. "Ma'am," the man continued, "until we can verify your claim, I'm going to ask you to step away from the aircraft. You're creating a scene." She raised an eyebrow. "I'm creating a scene?" Another uniform stepped forward, this one younger, more eager to impress. "We can escort you to the terminal while we sort this out." Her son's voice came out small. "Why are they being mean, Mommy?" That did it. She knelt beside him, cupping his face gently in her hands. "They're confused, baby. That's all. Sometimes when people don't understand something, they get scared, and scared people say foolish things." He nodded, trusting her, even when the world didn't. She stood back up, calm, measured, but inside, something was cracking. They weren't just questioning her now. They were teaching her son what suspicion looked like, what it felt like to be stared at, doubted, made small, and that wasn't something she could forgive easily. More people had gathered by now, staff from nearby hangars, a few passers-by recording on their phones, a woman whispering into her husband's ear, shaking her head like she'd seen enough. She doesn't look like someone who owns a jet like that. She probably knows. Someone who works for the company. She's probably someone's assistant. No one asked her directly. No one gave her the benefit of the doubt. They assumed. They whispered. They judged. And all she had done, all she had ever done, was try to build something real, something lasting. Now, standing under the open sky, surrounded by doubt and guarded suspicion, Alexis realized what this was really about. It wasn't about paperwork. It wasn't about flight manifests or security protocols. It was about control, about keeping people like her in a box, quiet, grateful, unseen. She wasn't here to play by their rules anymore. She didn't scream. She didn't fight. She let them pile on the assumptions, the disrespect, the disbelief, because the moment was coming, and when it did, she would let the truth speak louder than their hate ever could. The sun had barely shifted above the horizon when the sound of polished shoes clicked sharply against the concrete. All heads turned. Alexis didn't need to look. She already knew who it was. The figure walking toward them wasn't loud. He didn't bark orders. He didn't flash weapons. He didn't need to. The air shifted around him. The way people straightened up, the way whispers died. It was the kind of presence that came only with power that couldn't be faked. He approached slowly, crisply dressed in a charcoal suit that fit like it was cut for royalty. Dark sunglasses hid his eyes, but his expression, firm, unreadable, sent waves through the crowd. One of the guards stepped forward instinctively, trying to assert control. "Sir, this is a secure." The man held up a hand. Just one small motion, and everything stopped. His voice, when it came, was calm and clear. "Dr. Alexis Carter, is there a problem?" Alexis gave the smallest smile. "Apparently, yes." The man turned slowly to the lead officer. "Explain." The officer swallowed hard. "We were verifying her identity. The crew didn't recognize her as an authorized passenger." "She's not a passenger," the man said. A pause. "She's the owner." The officer blinked. "Owner of the company?" "No." The man took a step closer. "Of everything you see behind her. The plane, the charter service, the hangar you're standing beside. All of it." Murmurs rippled again. This time the tone had changed. Confusion, disbelief, embarrassment. Alexis slowly reached into her designer handbag, pulled out a sleek black folder and handed it over. The man accepted it, flipped it open, and held it up for everyone to see. Inside was a certificate. It read, "Certificate of Ownership, Carter Jet Holdings, Inc., signed, stamped, and sealed." Underneath it, bold and unmistakable, "Owner, Dr. Alexis J. Carter." And then, beneath that, another document, one that silenced the last remaining voices in the crowd. An asset valuation. Carter Jet Holdings, including subsidiaries and real estate, $2.1 billion. Man looked around slowly, moving his sunglasses now. His eyes locked onto the lead officer. He profiled a billionaire, he said plainly, and humiliated her in front of her child. The officer opened his mouth and closed it again. One of the younger guards stepped backward, subtly removing his hand from his belt. The attendant who had laughed earlier was now frozen in place, face pale, jaw twitching. The one who had checked the manifest was stammering. "Apologies to no one in particular. I didn't know," he whispered. "I didn't know who she was." Alexis's voice was soft but piercing. "You didn't care." Now the mood had shifted entirely. The cameras that were still filming no longer lingered on her like a suspect but like a symbol. A woman standing tall, calm, and composed, while those who had doubted her were unraveling. The executive beside her turned to the gathering crowd. "This is exactly the problem. This is what happens when appearance matters more than fact. Assumption replaces investigation." Turned again to the staff, his voice colder now. Every person who laid a hand on her raised their voice. Her or spoke about her like she didn't belong, expect consequences. This will not be overlooked. A woman from the airline staff started to step forward. "We're truly sorry." Alexis held up a hand. "I'm not here for apologies." Her son tugged gently at her sleeve. "Mommy, they're not being mean anymore." She smiled at him softly. "They were never supposed to be mean to begin with, baby. That's the point." The man in the suit stepped aside, giving her space to walk past the line of security, past the stunned flight crew, past the plane she had paid for with years of sleepless nights and relentless work. As she walked toward the steps, a voice rang out, someone in the crowd loud enough to be heard. "She's a boss." And then another. She owned all of them. She didn't even raise her voice. That was the twist none of them saw coming. Not just that she was rich, not just that she had power, but that she carried it with calm, with grace, with proof. Not words, not pleas, just truth. The kind that didn't need defending. Because when the facts finally showed up, every lie collapsed under its weight. The sun glinted off the polished steps of the jet as Alexis turned to face them one last time. The flight crew, the airport security, the airline supervisors, all frozen in shame and awkward silence. The executive who had arrived moments earlier stood beside her, arms folded, letting her lead now. She didn't shout. She didn't gloat. She just walked back down the stairs with that same composed grace she'd carried since the moment this began. The lead officer, still red in the face, took a hesitant step forward. "Dr. Carter, we sincerely apologize for the misunderstanding. Truly, if there's anything we can do." She cut him off with a glance, not angry, not spiteful, just tired. "You humiliated me," she said quietly, but every word hit like thunder. "For no reason. You dragged my son into it. You made assumptions. Not one of you asked me a real question. You barked. You dismissed. You grabbed me like I didn't matter." The female attendant who had laughed earlier was now tearful, her voice breaking. I just didn't think someone like you." Alexis stepped toward her. "Someone like me?" The attendant went silent. Her eyes dropped to the floor. "That's the part that burns," Alexis continued, turning so all of them could hear. "Not that you made a mistake, but that you thought you knew who I was before I opened my mouth, and you treated me like a problem to remove, not a person to respect." One of the younger guards muttered, "We were just following protocol." She locked eyes with him. "Then your protocol is broken." Just then, a black SUV pulled up. A man in uniform stepped out, tall, sharp, clearly someone in command. The moment he stepped through the gate, two of the officers stiffened. "Detective Carter?" one asked. He gave a single nod, then moved toward Alexis. "Mom, are you okay?" The gasp that passed through the group was nearly comical. Faces turned, eyes widened. The ones who had been roughest with her now looked like they'd seen a ghost. Alexis nodded at her son. "They made sure we'd never forget today." Detective Carter glanced toward the officers and crew, his badge clearly visible on his chest. "Then let's make sure they don't forget either." The senior officer stepped forward, stammering. "We didn't know who she was, sir. She didn't present identification right away." The detective shook his head slowly. "So that justified the cuffs, the dragging of a child, the public scene." The woman in the tan uniform who had originally called for backup looked like she wanted to vanish. Her eyes welled up. Alexis could have destroyed them with words. But instead she breathed in, steady and calm. "If I were anyone else, someone without resources, without connections, this would have broken me, and you'd all move on like nothing happened." The detective looked to the crowd and said clearly, "But she's not just someone. She built this. You were standing on her legacy while telling her she didn't belong." The airline manager, who had until then been silent, finally spoke up. "We'll take immediate action. Every name involved will be documented. There will be suspensions, maybe terminations." Alexis's voice turned colder. "Don't do it because you're afraid. Do it because it's right." The manager nodded, flustered. "Yes, of course, of course." And then the crowd parted again, this time not for power or fear, but for respect. As Alexis turned to leave, her heels clicking against the pavement, people moved out of her way, not because she demanded it, because they understood now who she was, not just her title or her money, but her strength. Her son took her hand. "Are they going to get in trouble?" She didn't answer right away. Then, she looked down at him and smiled gently. "Sometimes the best punishment is letting them sit with what they did." He nodded. "You were brave." She squeezed his hand. "We both were." Behind them, the murmurs continued, not of mockery or doubt, but of guilt, admiration, and awe, because in the end she didn't have to raise her voice to rise above them. She didn't need to threaten to make them listen. She carried herself like a storm in heels, quiet, powerful, and impossible to ignore. And those who once dismissed her were now forced to watch her walk away in silence, knowing they'd just tried to cage a lioness. The car ride away from the airport was quiet, not heavy, just full. Alexis looked out the window, her hand resting gently on her son's small fingers. The sun had started to dip below the skyline, casting long shadows across the road. Her heart beat slower now, not from stress or adrenaline, but from a powerful calm settling in, the kind that only comes when you've stood your ground and didn't let the world shake you. She wasn't smiling for the cameras. There weren't any, no flashing lights or reporters, but her face held a peace that no apology could ever give. She had carried her dignity through fire and didn't drop it once. Her son finally broke the silence. "Mom, are we ever going back there?" She thought for a second. "Maybe one day," she said, "but not because they deserve it, because we don't run from what's ours." He stared ahead, his young face thoughtful. They looked scared at the end. She nodded. "Not of me, of the truth, of finally seeing the person they tried so hard not to see." There was something about that silence, so full of understanding. He was just a boy, but after today he'd never look at the world the same again. That hurt her and made her proud all at once. Justice hadn't come in the form of revenge. There were no lawsuits, no headlines, no shouting matches. Justice was a woman holding her head high when the world tried to bury her in shame, and refusing to give them the satisfaction. She didn't need the world's permission to be great. She didn't need their approval to be powerful. Her existence was her evidence. Her voice was her proof. And her presence? That was her protest. They had tried to decide who she could be based on her skin, her silence, and the smile she wore that day, but they had no idea who they were standing in front of. They saw a black woman and thought they saw weakness, but they were looking at wealth built from scratch, education earned through sacrifice, and a fire that no disrespect could put out. In a world that constantly asks people to prove they belong, She stood in front of them and proved that she never needed to. She didn't fight for just herself today. She fought for every woman who's been asked to show more proof, for every black person who's been questioned, followed, or ignored, for every parent trying to protect their child from a system that's already watching them with suspicion, for every voice that's been silenced before it even got the chance to speak. She won more than an argument. She won the right to be seen, not by title, not by bank account, but by truth. Respect isn't earned through wealth, it's owed at birth. Dignity isn't reserved for the few. It's a right no one should have to fight for. And yet, here she was, still standing, still walking, still unstoppable. The road ahead looked clear now, not because the world had changed in one day, but because she had reminded it who she was. And sometimes, that's the spark that lights the fire. Let them remember her. Let them talk. Let the whispers shift from judgment to reverence. Because the woman they tried to drag off that plane, she owned the sky they thought she didn't belong in. Have you ever been judged before anyone knew your story? Has someone ever looked at you and assumed the worst, just because of how you looked, spoke, or carried yourself? This isn't just Alexis's story. It's a reflection of what too many people face every single day. Moments where dignity is challenged, worth is questioned, and silence is expected. But silence doesn't protect us. Speaking up does. Stories like this one matter because they remind us that we all have a role in creating a world where respect isn't optional and dignity isn't negotiable. What would you have done in her place? Have you ever stood up for yourself or wished someone had stood up for you? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Let's talk about it. Let's listen. Let's grow. And if you believe in justice, truth, and treating people right, hit the like button, share this story, and follow for more powerful moments like this one.